Hey everybody, and welcome to the D&D podcast. Today, I want you to make a video about the strongest character I ever made as a DM. He is an NPC and a final boss, and I mentioned him a couple of times before. His name is Silverwood. All one word, no last name. It's weird. Now, I initially made Silverwood to be the final boss of a campaign, which would consist of 11 level 20 characters, and I wanted it to be a challenge for them. So naturally, I had to go all out. He was a very illegal character according to the sources I used, but I, naturally had to do it that way. And it was really fun making him. I gave him a full backstory, which I still love, by the way. I might go into that in a minute. And he was very powerful. I gave him character levels as a wizard. And though he probably would be more in line with a warlock, because his entire thing, the gist of his backstory is he was born to a very powerful wizard, and she raised him, she taught him everything she knew, and eventually he went out and discovered things on his own. And one day, with some more demonic experimentation, he meant to make the deal, but he accidentally summoned the avatar of Asmodeus. To those of you who don't know, Asmodeus is the equivalent to the devil of D&D. Like, I know there is like a demons and devils like listings for D&D, but this guy is actually like Satan of D&D. So he kind of summoned him. He offered him so much power, it tempted him and he couldn't refuse. Silverwood accepted the deal, but did not realize that, on the other hand, because he accepted this, he would essentially become kind of like an avatar to Asmodeus himself, with Asmodeus pretty much straight up just possessing him. I know that's kind of weird and not exactly with the lore, but this was the first time I ever DM'd, and I thought it was really cool, so that's what I did. And I'll get to that in a second. So, now that he was possessed, he wanted to bring a lot of destruction. There actually was a reason for that. It was basically like the equivalent of Apocalypse or Thanos from Endgame. Basically, everything will fall and I'll start new. So he began destroying everything, and that's when he met some resistance from a clan, a very powerful clan, and they were able to hold him off for a couple of years from advancing. But as the clan elder, who was also the strongest, began to age and he would not be able to last forever, that's when he called upon some adventurers to put a stop to him, and that's where the story of the party begins. Now, Silverwood, eventually, he was weak to one particular thing. There was this purple rock that, when shot into him, it would essentially remove all of the powers Asmodeus granted him temporarily, and he would basically just be a normal level 20 wizard instead, which is still a very powerful being. And, not nearly as powerful as one possessed by Asmodeus. And like I said, the plan for this was then the 11 people who were also level 20, some of which who were also wizards, would just then, beat the crap out of him until he was dead. This is where the problem came. Initially, I had 9 of the 11 people because 2 of them couldn't make it. And I thought, that's okay, 9 people, that's still going to be fine against one guy. But that's until slowly things started coming up, and eventually we were down to 4. Now, as a DM, I should have altered the character. I should have nerfed him massively, made him a lot more manageable. But then the thought occurred to me, what if I didn't? What if I just let this be and just kind of see what happens? So that's kind of what I did. I had this practically unstoppable force against these 4 people, and I wanted to see what would happen. Eventually, by some miracle, the players were able to get the stone, the method to control the stone. They went to Silverwood's own tower in the middle of the desert, which he had created from a forest. They went up to him, they began to fight him, and just so you know, the stone was very difficult to be accurate with because it's a rock that shoots a beam with really no indication of which way the beam is going to come out of. So there was always a percentile die of how it would shoot. It was more of a, but then after it shot, it would be roll to hit kind of thing. So eventually they were able to shoot Silverwood with the rock after he downed one of the players, I believe. After that, he began to retreat because he knew what this meant. And behind him, he had a chest. And he opened the chest. And he jumped into it. The players were a little confused, but they ran after him. And when they opened it, they found a permanent portal to Limbo. The plane of existence called Limbo. For those of you who don't know, it's a plane of pure chaos, and there's nothing stable there. I believe you have to have an incredible amount of either intelligence or willpower just to have solid ground beneath your feet. If you don't, you will just be falling, and then maybe you'll be drowning, then flying, and then shocked by electricity, which turns to fire, and then grass. There's absolutely no stability. There's absolutely no... Well, there is a way to control it. But you have to have either an incredible amount of intelligence or willpower. I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but it's kind of crazy. Anyway, Silverwood, gets into Limbo, and as he does meet the requirements, he is able to have the solid ground beneath his feet, and he's able to run. Most of the players do, and the ones that don't are in between the ones that do. No, there was only one that didn't. He was in between the other 2 that did. And they chased after him, eventually casting enough ranged spells to take him down permanently. It was very satisfying, especially for the sorcerer that got the final blow, with his twin-spelled Finger of Death. It was very effective, and I believe one of them was a crit. Yeah, one was a crit. There was a lot of damage involved. And Silverwood had at last fallen. Unfortunately for them, the players, they did not realize what his real goal was, which was I'm not sure many of you will be familiar with this, and I know I won't pronounce it right, but there's a spell called something like Carsus's Armor, Carsius. I can't remember how it's pronounced or looks off the top of my head, but it's the only 12th level spell to ever exist. Basically, it replaces you and a god of your choosing. The only time it was ever cast was by the guy named Carsus or Carsius. I'll say that wrong, and he replaced the goddess of magic. Now, unfortunately, in doing this, he accidentally kind of broke magic for 2 minutes, and then it killed him, and he went back into his body, and then the goddess of magic returned to her to commit suicide in order to save magic itself. It was a big lore thing, but Silverwood wanted to recreate it, and he had the power to. because the gist of it was Asmodeus wanted even more power, so he wanted essentially his avatar to possess another deity. So he would essentially have two of them in one mind. And unfortunately, though, he got the ingredients wrong and the entire thing incorrect. Like, to cast the spell, you needed a golden dragon's gizzard, some blood of a Trask, and a lot more stuff. But he did some incorrect stuff, like he got a silver dragon's gizzard and the scales of a Trask. Stuff like that wouldn't really go hand in hand. But eventually, right, and he believed that the last step was to actually die for it to happen. So when the players actually did kill him, a spell did happen, but it wasn't the one that he thought it was. And it sorta worked, but then not really. When the players wanted a second campaign, I decided, okay, it'll work to an extent, but he won't actually be a deity. So he kind of became like as strong as like a demigod, but yet he couldn't really maintain a physical form because he was killed, and he would kind of fade in and out of existence, though when he was in, he was extremely powerful. And then eventually that form was turned into Cthulhu, which I covered in the time that the monk one-shot Cthulhu. After that, we tried to do the D20 modern rules, which naturally I brought him back again as a final boss since I BS'd the entire campaign. I had nothing prepared the entire game, which is a terrible thing, but I'm very proud of it. I never planned anything for any session, I just showed up and improvised, and no one could tell. I'm not sure if that speaks to my improvisation skills or my lack of DMing skills. Though I think if it was my lack of DMing skills, they would want literally anyone else to DM instead of keep asking me to do it. I haven't been a player in so long. Anyway, after the modern day campaign, I brought him back one more time, kind of as a cameo. And at this point, the joke is I can't make a campaign or any game without Silverwood. And although I did with Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and I'm currently, it was just a cameo in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, I had him. And I'm working on a completely original horror-themed campaign right now that I'm kind of finishing up, but not quite there yet. And he actually, I actually have a cameo of him in there too. Okay, yeah, I guess I can't make a game without him, but the reason I have him in there now is more just as references to other stuff. It's not exactly because he's going to be the final villain or anything like that anymore. It's more just of my trademark. My marking is my character Silverwood, the most broken and overpowered character ever. But there was one thing that I never implemented with him that I really wanted to, but to this day I never had an opportunity. Originally, he was going to be extremely powerful, not because he was possessed, but because he created this new spell called Reality Shift. Now, I was very new to the game, but I still thought the concept was interesting. It's only for homebrew, not for... By no means should the spell ever be official in any capacity. But basically what Reality Shift does is he holds out his hand, he casts the level 9th spell, and I would take up my player's character sheets and then redistribute them at random. Essentially, it would be like a mind swap of sorts. I think the concept is very interesting, but I never implemented it, mainly because I had a lot of brand new characters. I mean, a lot of brand new players, not characters. Well, I guess the characters were new too, but a lot of brand new players to the game. And since I'm throwing so much at them already, there was no way I was going to do that to them. And then, as time went on, I just decided against it because I had mega lore for Silverwood by that point, and eventually, when I restarted the game again with a different group because I was in a different location for a while, I had the same reason again because they were new players. I didn't want to throw all that at them at once. But that was the original plan for Silverwood, for the reality shift spell, which I still think is interesting, but at this point, the lore I've crafted for him, I personally find it a lot more interesting, about him and Asmodeus, and yeah, Asmodeus has always still been a factor, like saying Waterdeep Dragon Heist, but there was an entire chapter built around the cult of Asmodeus and the Temple of Asmodeus. Or as some people call it, Asmodeus. I know, no matter which way I say it, someone will say it's a different way, but I say Asmodeus, even though it probably is Asmodeus. But yeah, in my next campaign, it should be the first time with no references to good old Asmodeus or Silverwood, well, except for the one reference. So this will be the first time I'm actually straying away from what I've always known as DM. But I think it's going to be really fun because because Silverwood, his entire thing was overpower and intimidate the players through that. Now the entire world I'm building will do that. It's a good horror-themed campaign with many different kinds of horror elements depending on the location on the map they're on. And I think it should be really fun. But with Silverwood, every time they kill him, well, at least in the second time they kill Cthulhu, before the cult transformed him into that, he did cast the spell Clone, which I'm not sure if I read right at the time, but basically you create a clone version of yourself, and it will kind of take your place, like, it will basically be a child, and when you die, it's kind of like when that child is born, and it'll come out of like a pot or something that you cast the spell on. It's kind of weird and a little bit confusing. I should probably reread the spell. But essentially, every time they kill him, I with the exception of the original time, I had him cast Clone, and he would always come back. And they won't be able to kill him if they run into him in the new campaign, because right now they're level 6, and I have no intention of getting them anywhere near level 20. But I don't know, he's always just been a fun character for me to have, and I always get flipped off by my by my people every time I even mention his name or just the words pink eyes. That was always his defining characteristic, the fact that he had pink eyes. And I never, to this day, well actually, not to this day, but nowadays, I don't even have to say his name. If I just say a figure is there, you look up and you notice something peculiar about him. His eyes are the color pink, and you've never seen anyone quite like that before, or something along those lines. I just love the sense of dread it gives to my party. But that's about all I have to say about Silverwood. He was extraordinarily powerful and probably my favorite NPC that I've ever made, or final boss that I ever made. And yeah, that's about all I have to say. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Give me a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if there's anything I can be talking about. And until next time, roll well.